I'm going to ask questions. Tell me about the show this afternoon, gentlemen. What can we expect from?
Well, I'll turn it over to my producer and director here.
Well, you're going to get a chance to revisit the 1940s, and we didn't pick a specific date. We picked the 40s because there's a little flashover. You can go into the early 50s where radio was still reigning as king and television hadn't taken over yet. But the entire idea is to transport you back in time to when radio was the king and it was a golden era, and these great stars got their start in radio and then went on to television and of course film.
Now, how many costume changes are there?
Too many.
We have about 4 stars on the show today.
Yeah.
Bob Hope, Jack Benny, Red Skelton, and Jimmy Durante.
And the entire reason for doing that is instead of just bringing up an impressionist who does different characters, a la Rich Little, who of course is great at what he does, but he doesn't sustain it. He can do 5 minutes. One of the things that when I started to put the show together and was looking for the right actor, and that's what Lynn is, he's not an impressionist, he's an actor who can create the persona and carry it on for 10, 15 minutes. And as I had said previously and during an interview, it may have been with you, James, after the show, many times people come up and he's in his costume and I'm standing there and they'll say to one of us, all right, now where's the actor that did Jack Benny? Where's the actor that did Jimmy Durante? That's how great his transformation is.
That's my biggest compliment when we do theaters. Well, today will be the same thing, but I always say, now if any of, I close with Bob Hope, and I say, if any of you have any Hope stories, please come up and tell me. We'll be out in the lobby. And invariably, there will be 2 or 3 people come up and say, aren't the other guys coming out? You know?
And the thing with the Hope stories, it gets very poignant many times, especially if you're talking to either WW2 or Korea veterans. They have such fond memories of seeing Bob Hope when they were young men. And many of them, the tears just well up in their eyes when they're talking to him. It's a very nice time to look at it.
Well, they do such a transference, especially the older veterans, and they'll say, they'll start talking to me, and then they get tearful, and they'll say, Bob, when you were in Seoul, you know, and they'll hug me, and it meant so much that you were there, and they just, you know, the first few times it happened, I've been doing this for 11 years, but the first few times that happened, it was almost like a overwhelm, you know. But I let them play it out. I never try to say, well, you realize I'm not Hope or something like that. Just let them handle it. In Greensboro, North Carolina last weekend, I had the honor, and I consider it an honor. Somebody came and got me after the show, and they said that you got to meet this guy. And he had been a fighter pilot in 3 wars. He actually did strafing attacks in Iwo Jima, World War II. And then he flew fighter planes in the Korean War, and then even in the part of Vietnam. And dear old fella. And he went into the tear thing too.
One thing I might add is the format that we use, the reason I created the radio format is I had to have an opportunity for Lynn to get off, change costumes, and change personas. So by doing it as they did in the old style, announcer would read the announcement or just point and get the commercial played. So that's the time that we take, I kind of a filler while he changes costumes and comes back as another character.
Now you mentioned commercials. Are we going to hear old school?
You're going to hear old school commercials. I won't tell you, but I read a few and have taken a little poetic license maybe with the endings, but the jingles will be some that you'll remember. I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but those people who were listening to radio in those years in the 40s and early 50s will remember the jingles.
Now, what's your favorite character to portray with this whole thing?
Whichever one I'm doing.
Okay, I had to get assaulted there, so I'm
glad you asked, so I could give you that answer.
For me, it's me.
Well, how do the younger generations react when their parents bring them there?
Fantastic. We've had one thing I have to clarify is the fact that comedy is good. And if you make people laugh, they can be 12 or they can be 120. If it's funny, they're going to laugh.
Right.
And the material that Lynn has selected and that we use in the show is very funny, and we get huge laughs all the time. But the younger kids are come up, and they don't remember what it was, what radio was in those days. They don't remember who these people are. But they do say, boy, that was funny. That guy did this or that guy did that. And for the grandparents, it's usually a great chance to bring their children and grandchildren. And that happens quite a bit when we do theater. When we do military museums, like we'll be going to the USS Yorktown next week to do 2 shows, it's different. You're talking basically to a veteran-filled audience, and their reaction is different, but they still laugh.
Lynn, what were you doing during the day and time when Bob Hope was having his road shows, and were you like the rest of us sitting at home watching? I don't know how old you were then and what your life was like at that point in time. But
He was only 34.
I won't tell my real age. Well, I, like a lot of people from my generation, I mean, I can remember when Pearl Harbor was bombed. I was sitting on I was a farm kid from Iowa, but I was a sunny afternoon, I was sitting on the roof of the chicken house with my grandpa, and he was telling me stories, and my mother came running out and saying that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And and I didn't really understand what that meant, but I knew everybody was upset, so I was too. But then skipping ahead, then by the time we got a television set, well, I used to listen to Red Skelton and Jack Benny, and not Bob Hope so much on radio at that age. I didn't really get into the Bob Hope until television came out and he was doing his specials. But Red Skelton was probably the first person I started impersonating just as a child, you know, and keeping the family laughing. And Jack Benny, I always thought that was great, and Jimmy Durante. And then I was doing shows up until about 11 years ago, particularly with those other 3 characters. I'm also a musician. I play 12 instruments, and I had a musical variety show where I work it all in. And then some of the agents, a couple in Hollywood and a couple in Chicago, when Bob was passing away, they said they really would like to find someone that could do a Bob Hope. And first of all, I says, nobody impersonates Bob Hope. And then a couple more people asked me, and so I said, well, I'll give it a shot. And I worked on it for about a year before I actually presented it in public. But it just really started to catch on. And I don't know if I've answered your question yet or not. I digress.
I guess you know, myself, I must be younger than you.
I
know you are.
Okay. And of course, I picture myself in the living room watching these shows, but they were part of the pattern that was my life, because I was a child growing up during the Vietnam era. My brother was there. My experience was watching his shows and wondering if I'd see my brother in the audience.
The Christmas specials.
Sure.
Yeah. I felt the same way, but I am much older than you. But yeah, it's. I'd like to pick up a question about the kids. A couple of summers ago, I did several shows down at New Orleans in the World War II Museum, National World War II Museum, and there was a lot of families came to those shows. And afterwards, I'd be out in the lobby, and the young kids would be coming up asking for autographs. And I'd say, well, did you remember any of those people? You know who those people were I was impersonating? And most of them would just comment, no, but you were so funny, you know, that they wanted it. And then the other thing that I wanted to say that has really been a highlight of doing the Bob Hope shows, last Veterans Day, I was doing a show in Arizona for the Classic Jazz Society's finale, and we made it a USO tribute, and Kelly Hope, who's Bob's youngest son, was there. And I was told that he may want to come up on the stage and say something, or he may not. Well, I knew what that meant, depending on what thought of the show. So as soon as I went into thanks for the memory, both Kelly and his wife, the tears just started running down their cheeks. And then, of course, as soon as I finished, he just stood up and came right up on the stage. And this is what he said to the audience. He said, "Folks, I can't tell you what it means to me to see my dad perform again after 10 years. And boy, that just made my whole tribute to Bob fly right there.
And he's been to other shows since then. We do a little larger version of this show with an actor that does Bing Crosby and one that does Dorothy Lamour, an actress. And Kelly came to that show and had the same reaction again. And he remembered, he said it was like going back with my dad to watch the rehearsals, because he had played with Dorothy Lamour's children and he had been with Bing Crosby's kids. So it just, again, points to the fact of how well he does in creating his characters. For me, the pleasure is that as a kid growing up, these were the people I listened to on radio and people I saw later on television and in some cases in a film. And what an opportunity for me to get a chance to now work with the people that I idolized.
Now, what's the most? I guess what's been the best reaction you guys have gotten doing this tribute show across the country?
Oh, just every show we do, I think the reaction is just so wonderful from the people, and particularly, let's face it, a lot of our audience, or most of our audiences, are seniors.
Yeah.
And I'll have, I remember this one lady in particular, I don't remember what city we were in, but we were down in front, and she came up to me and the tears were, she says, "You've given me my life back." She said, "I was raised with all of those stars." That kind of a thing, you know, it just really gets you. Such a good, warm, fuzzy feeling.
And speaking of ladies coming up, we did a show in Ohio, and two young, well, fairly young, middle-aged ladies came up, and they went up to Lynn, and they had a cap with them. They had a caricature of Bob Hope on it, and I'm sure he figured they'd want him to sign it. Well, it turns out they were Bob Hope's nieces, and they just were so overwhelmed with what he did, they gave him the hat.
Yeah, they were hugging me and saying, "Oh, just like Uncle Bob," and they were so sweet about it. Marion, Ohio, that's what that was.
You get all the reaction for Bob Hope. Do you get any reaction for any of the other characters?
Well, that's the interesting thing. Since I come out after the show, because that's how I finish, this is Bob.
Yeah.
But it's so cute because people come up and say, "I like Red Skelton best." Somebody else will say, "That Jimmy Durante, boy, that's what made it for me." And somebody else will say, "Who have I left out? Jack Benny." You know, they'll say, "Oh, Jack Benny, he's my favorite." You know, so it hits four different areas of favoritism.
Yeah, the reaction is the same. Each character gets the same amount of ovations and the same adulation at the end of their little particular bit.
What is your favorite bit?
Whichever one I'm doing.
Well, the fun for me is working with each character is pretty much like doing what Don Wilson did for Jack Benny. There's interaction between myself and the characters, so I look forward to each and every character gets a chance for me to ham it up a little bit.
I will say that one character that is really a lot of fun to do is Jimmy Durante. Because he's a little more outrageous than the others. Jack Benny is low key, you know, and Bob is Bob, and Red Skelton, of course, I do not only a monologue as Red Skelton, but I'll do Junior, the mean little kid, and sometimes I do Clint Cadiddlehopper or Deadeye, the cowboy. And now today I'll be doing a very famous, serious piece of Red's, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. I thought that'd be a perfect setting here to do it today, the Red Skelton's Pledge of Allegiance.
In fact, we are working on a show for Red called Red Sails into the Sunset, which is his farewell appearance. And that show is going to be ready for us to tour with in 2015.
Because you're portraying characters who have been here and gone, do you come up with new material, or do you try to use all of their material?
Both.
Okay.
Like coming into this show today, there's several books that Bob has written or co-authored with his daughter or other people over the years, or written himself. And so I took out one book. It's called The Life of a Hooker. Cough. And because I remember there was one nice chapter in there just about his relationship with Eisenhower. And so I'll be putting in some of that today. Yeah, I'll take stories, and I hear a good story, and I'll adapt it into the style that that character would have told it.
Yeah, we can take contemporary material, and we, even though we're in the 1940s, can weave it into the character to make it fit and play. If it's funny, it comes in.
Have you guys got a chance to tour the grounds and check out the
We've
facility?
seen the green room and the loading dock.
Oh, okay.
That's a start.
We got to the front steps. No, and that's one of the shames of being the type of acts that we are. We're in today, do the show, gone tomorrow, and really a lot of times don't have an opportunity to really enjoy the venue that we're playing.
Yeah.
And especially when it's something like this museum. So what happens is we have to come back.
Yeah, we've done the Glenn Miller Festival up in Fort Morgan, Colorado for 4 years. So 2 years ago, we decided just to stay over an extra day and see the air show, and they brought in the Glenn Miller Band. They do that every year.
And go to the museum.
And that was kind of, yeah, they have a little Glenn Miller museum. They had a World War II museum there too, but the guy sold everything off because he'd been supporting it himself for many years.
Now, as you guys mentioned earlier, that there's certain people in the audience that, and a lot of the young crowd, are not going to know Bob Hope or know of Red Skelton and things. Do you guys think that at some point the show will become sort of passé because there won't be? Or is it a situation where people are educating their kids of who Bob Hope was?
I think there's one of saving grace that's happened. There has been a plethora of TV channels coming up, and they are a lot of nostalgia channels.
Yeah.
And they're running Jack Benny, Bob Hope specials, Red Skelton. So now the younger audience is discovering these, and this show and our other shows give them an opportunity to see what it would have been like to enjoy them in person. So I don't really think, I think because of this, there was at a time, yeah, we were looking at the fact that you may have the show has a lifespan of 5 years or 7 years because World War II vets are going every day, and then Korea vets, and then Vietnam is still moving toward the aging area. But as of today, because that's where a lot of the young people say, oh, I saw you on, you know, speaking to him as Jack Benny, I saw your show on television, it's very funny. So that's a saving grace for us.
I think the Bob Hope will probably be more familiar for many, many years, because it's been interesting to me to see how some families have nobody in their family that was ever in the military. And that there are other families, other clusters of families where the great-grandfathers and the fathers and the dads and now the brothers and sisters or sons, and they're just military families. And with those people, even the young, say college age or high school age kids will come up and say, oh, I've seen all your Christmas specials or something from the Vietnam era, like you said. And because grandparents still have those videos or something and watch it with them. And it's an interesting thing. I was up in Gainesville, Texas a few weeks ago, and I did the show in the hangar, and most of the audience came dressed in World War II garb, including, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids, high school kids, college kids, and they all were just really enjoying it. And then the next day I had a little time to go out to the field where they were going to do the reenactment. And here are these young kids, and they're dressed in World War II battle gear and stuff, and they're part of the reenactment, So it's just like a family tradition, I guess, that kind of gets passed down and keeps them.
Yeah, it's a grown-up version of Dungeons and Dragons. The other thing is, speaking about Christmas, we do have a special Christmas show that we do from November through December 31st, where all of the music and all of the commercials are geared toward the Christmas holiday, and a lot of the monologues change to fit into the theme of the holidays. And that's always been fun for us to do. It gives us the Christmas spirit.
Where do people get more information about you?
You can go, right now, my website is down because I'm having it, we're upgrading the website. So at this point, I would imagine you can go to Lynn's website and find out a little bit more.
In fact, you can just, I have a website, lynnrobertsenterprises.com, or you can just put in bobhopeimpersonator.com and it'll take you to the same site.
Now, it seems to me, just doing research, you're the, as far as I can find, you're the only Bob Hope tribute. Is there other people doing Bob Hope and tributes or impersonations?
We're going to keep it that way. Now, there is another younger guy in Las Vegas who does a few Bob Hope shows, but he works a lot just in Vegas doing, he does an Ed Sullivan and Back to the Future. Doc Brown, isn't it? The guy with the wild hair, he was doing a lot of that. And usually I get the first calls and then I pass them on to him if I'm not available.
And Lynn is the only one that sings as well.
Oh.
That makes a difference, because Bob was a total entertainer.
Yeah.
You know, he danced, he sang, and he told stories.
Do you ever include attractive young women on the show like Bob did?
Well, yes, if there's a beauty queen in the area or
Yeah.
something.
We laughed at it before there.
I just like Bob, I love to have those beauty queens on the show. And in fact, I have a few little routines that I'll teach them at rehearsal. Or if they're a singer, I have a couple of duets that I like to do with them. Now, last week in Greensboro, North Carolina, there are two young ladies, they call themselves Letters from Home, and they do a lot of veteran shows. And we worked some things out together and had a lot of fun with them.
And especially if there's one, Jane Russell, of course, was in a film with Bob Hope. And whenever he can find a Jane Russell that we can work into the show, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, I found one down in Tucson. She's just very close to being a Jane Russell, and have a lot of fun with her. And then I sing a duet with the girls if I can. Two Sleepy People was one from the movie Thanks for the Memory. Also, Can't Get Started, or Bob was in the movie The Lemon Drop Kid, and that's where he introduced Silver Bells.
And which is part of the Christmas show.
And if you ever watched any of his Christmas shows, he almost always sang Silver Bells with whoever, Raquel Welch or Marie Osmond or whoever the guest was. Bob would be singing that with them on the show. And one cute thing about our Dorothy Lamour, we were somewhere up in California,
Fresno?
yeah, I guess so. And after the show, I was walking with our Dorothy Lamour down to the lobby, and this tall guy came up and he leaned over and he kissed her on the cheek and he said, "Great show, Mom." And she was a little taken aback, and he says, "I'm sorry, let me explain it. I am Dorothy Lamour's son." So those are the things that are fun, you know.
And he would just raved and went on and on about how well she did as Dorothy.
Yeah, yeah. He said he had tears in his eyes all the time she was on, hearing her sing those songs and stuff.
And which is the fun of our format, because it's adaptable. We can change the script. I can write people in, write people out. So and that is, again, one of the reasons that we chose that particular format. While it may not be tied in with the show we're doing now, but we have another show that we're touring with called Heavenly Laughter, in which Lynn is Jack Benny and an actor from Philadelphia named Peter Salzer plays George Burns. And
He's
of
a
course,
dead ringer.
they were longtime friends, and the two of them get together and come back. I play Clarence the Angel, who brings them back to Earth stole that name from their film, I shall not mention. Anyhow, the whole idea is that they come back to Earth, and their reason they're coming back is when they were alive, they both pulled practical jokes, and they were known for that on each other as well as their friends. So they have to clear their slate, they have to come back to make the world laugh again, which is a good thing to do anyhow. And that's had great success.
I'll borrow one of George's lines.
Yes.
I guess we were pretty funny because we did this senior center, and when we finished, the activity director came up and says, "You guys were really funny. At the end of your show, there was hardly a dry seat in the house."
Oh!
Now, you mentioned that you do a musical show where you play several instruments.
Yeah.
What's that like? What's the...
Well, I tell you, and since I've been so busy as Bob Hope and the other guys, for the last 10 years, I've only done that maybe 4 or 5 times a year, and I don't anymore. There's so many instruments, I don't even book it outside of Arizona.
Well, we worked that instrumental
Yeah.
talent of his into our show on Heavenly Laughter. There's a point where Clarence is stuck because George had to go answer the telephone, the heaven phone for Gracie, and Jack's looking for his violin, so the angel says, "You know what I should do is bring back some of these immortal musicians. I know how to do that." So Lynn then comes back on as Benny Goodman, Jimmy Dorsey, Clyde McCoy, and then my favorite polka king, Stash Kankowski, which is a gag bit.
Good Lord.
And so he does get a chance to use those talents. I wanted to be able to work those into a show, and was able to do it for Heavenly Laughter.
Yeah, but as far as taking all 10 or 12 instruments, and in that show I would play double trumpets, 2 at the same time, 2 saxes at
Wow.
the same time, sax and clarinet at the same time. It sounds like bagpipes. And then on the flute I would play Yankee Doodle on the flute and hum Dixie at the same time, and things like that, as well as tributes to various other musicians.
Well, you did those on
Boots
the
Randolph sax.
John what was it, John Davidson show?
But yeah, on NBC on John Davidson.
He appeared a number of times. He
Years-
won the
years
Gong
ago.
show, as a matter of fact, too.
It's funny, my wife, whenever she's telling me about, or telling anybody about me, she says, "And he was on the Gong Show." And that's the thing, people think, Gong Show, you know?
But high visibility, and that's how you
Yeah.
spread the word. Anything else?
No? That's all I got. I don't know about...
Now, we have some questions for you folks. Okay?
Hey, awesome.
We're ready.
Go.
There's 2 train tracks.
And we're out of time.
Well, we thank you all very much.
It
It's
was a lot of
our
fun.
pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate it.
Yes.
We'll see you out on stage.